So let's listen to it with some music. Hi guys, SKETI here. Today we're going to look at 5 ways to make your snares better in mixes, so we're going to get straight into it. Right, the first thing that we're going to look at is how to tune your snare to the track that you're making. Now what I've done here is I've just set some musical loops with a hi-hat pattern and a kick, and then I've got a bass line, lead line, and then some chords as well. Now this is an F major, so what you're going to see on the screen right now is all of the frequencies and their equivalent hertz. So like well, the pitches and the hertz, so obviously A, then B flat, then B, and C, and so on, and the hertz that are attached to those pitches. So with this track being in F, what we tend to find with snares is it's good to be between about 200 and 400 hertz. So for F, that's 349 hertz, because if we divided that by 2, it would be below 200 hertz. So what we do is, I've got an EQ8 here and I've got the frequency analyzer, and if I just press play on this, because I'm just looping around the snare, and I'll play the snare by itself first. So then if we listen to that with the music, so it sort of sounds okay, but we could make it a bit better. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to solo that snare and then find out where the fundamental note is, and it's usually the highest peak in the snare wave. So about here. So yeah, it's about 300 hertz. So F is 349 hertz, and what I've done here is I've got a frequency shifter and I've shifted it up 49 hertz. So let's listen back to that with the music. So now that snare is totally in tune with the music. You don't have to use a frequency shifter, by the way. You could use pitch shifting, stick it into a sampler, shift it that way as well, and you could get a lot more microtuning with sense and so on and so forth. Now, if you're finding that's too high, what I could do is, whatever key you're working in, if you're going for the fundamental, obviously with this it's F, look at the 5th note, which is C. So obviously if you're working in E flat, it would be B flat, which would be the 5th note. If you're in C, it would be G, and so on and so forth. So in this case, C is at 262 hertz. So with the fundamental initially being at 300, I'm just going to bring that down. So that's 262 minus 300. And that would be, quick maths in my head, minus 38 hertz. Now let's listen to that. So now I have 2 choices. I've either got the low snare or the high snare. Personally for this, I preferred the high snare. Fantastic. Now on to the next tip. So what we're going to do now is we're going to focus on the EQ. And what we've got here is basically how to automate the EQ and a couple of other steps. But before I get into automating EQ, just to tighten the snare up, is a good thing to look at in any drums is the 500 hertz region, because that's usually where the majority of your music sits. So think of it like if you were a guitarist and you were scooping your amp, doing a notch at that point. So I've just basically set to 500 hertz, this number 3 point here, and I'm just going to bring down that down in gain. Now obviously the Q's quite wide, so I'm going to tighten that Q up like so. And now let's listen. I'm going to turn this off and on when we listen to this by itself. So that's just giving a little bit more tightening up as well. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take out all of the bottom end below the fundamental, because it's just not needed at all. And I might even do the ×4 polarity one as well, which I think is 48 decibels per octave. 12, 24, 36, 48, yeah. Now the next thing I'm going to do, which we've set the fundamental now to 300 plus that 49 hertz, which is, if we look at F, 349 hertz, I'm just going to set that to the number 2 to 349. I've set that to 249, let's do 349 instead, there we go. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to boost that up just to really start bringing that fundamental frequency up a lot more. Fantastic. And then what I'm going to do to tighten this up, and this is quite a useful thing to do, is automate the gain of this so it goes down over time. So I've just pressed A to open up the automation, just make sure the gain of number 2 is on. Yeah. And then I'm just going to draw a point there, and I'm going to drag that down. Now obviously, depending on how long over time you're dragging it down to minus 15 decibels, determines how quickly it's going to reduce that fundamental. So let's listen to it without, and then listen to it with. And as you can hear, it's really tightened it up, and obviously you can decide how quickly that happens, so right at the beginning or a little bit further in, and obviously how long the slope happens for as well. And obviously if you hold Option down on a Mac, or it's either Control or Alt on Windows, you can obviously change the slope as well in Ableton Live 10.1. I'm not sure if it's in Ableton Live 10. So straight away, another way to tighten your snare up really easily is just automate the EQ. And what I'm going to do for the purpose of this is I'm just going to copy and paste that into every single snare after it as well. Fantastic. There we go. So on to the next tip. Alright, we're looking at layering. So at the moment I quite like this snare. It's pretty cool. I feel like it needs a little bit something more. Now what I could do obviously is, if I just want to bring in some top enders, I could just use a high shelf or another bell curve EQ just to bring that top end up. But what I want to do actually is add a little bit of an extra layer in, and with this is I found another snare, and I'm just going to bring this in, and actually I'll just solo the group of the snare. Yep. So this is just another layer of snare. If I turn the automation lines off, and what I've done here is when you're layering is you need to consider which one has the biggest transient in it, and obviously I'm looking at this main snare here. So I don't want the transient of the other snare, because we're going to get, if we have too many transients together, it starts to lose its power, because we could have phasing issues where the transients are slightly out of phase with each other. So all I've done there is I've put a fade in at that point, so the transient of this snare hits through that real hard hitting attack, and then this one sweeps in, and then a curve out at the end. And then just to make sure that this lays together is I've set the level lower than the initial one, so that was set to 0 decibels, and this one's set to -9 decibels, and also using a high pass filter, just taking all of the bottom end out up to like 550 Hertz. So let's listen to those two together now, and I'll turn them off and on so you can hear the difference. So that's great. Now that's just it's basically brought in some new top end that I wouldn't have had with the other snare. Even if I'd lifted the top end on that one, it would have sounded different. So again, all you have to do is just go through and layer some snares, find some different snare samples, just keep throwing them in. Right, the best way to hot swap is, if you wanted to, is actually load up a drum rack, stick that layer in, and then hot swap between those, which if I just do Shift, Command and T, just to show you dead quickly what I mean by that, drum rack, and then, yeah, see this button here, do that, and then you could just go through and obviously all of your different sample folders that you've got, and keep swapping in those snares until you find the one that you want. Right, the next tip we've got is gated reverb. Now this is a cool thing that you can do, and all I've set up here is a group. So we've got a dry chain in the group which has got nothing on it, and then we've got a reverb chain which is a fully wet reverb. It's not like a mixture between dry and wet. I'm just going to turn that group on actually. Yeah, I'll just ignore this for now because that's something we're going to come to in a second. So yeah, I've got a reverb, and these are the settings that I've used. Obviously I've done a high pass filter on the low end, was set to about 200-300 Hertz, just to get rid of any reverb in the bottom end. And then this gate here. Now you can do this one of two ways. You could either automate the level of this over time, so you can get a really personal to your taste curve that you've made of the level, or the easy way of doing it is just adding a gate after the reverb. Now obviously if I just turn this off and listen back to it, that's just the normal snare. But the next thing, obviously with that other chain with the fully wet reverb and then the gate after it, this is what it sounds like without any gating just yet. But all I have to do now is lift that threshold up to the point where I'm happy where the reverb is stopping. Like so, and all I have to do is change the amount of release length and how long that holds on for as well. And all that does basically is just adds an extra bit of sort of thickness and a little bit of width, obviously with it being reverb. If the snare samples are in stereo, it just sort of thickens up that sound of that snare. And obviously if you go with this really extreme, you can get into that really 80s sounding snare drum that was really popular back in the day with people like Phil Collins and so on, with those big sort of 80s rock bands and electro pop from the 80s as well. And on to the last tip, some compression. Now we can do lots of different types of compression. The first one we can look at is obviously if we just want to make the snare hit really hard. It's all about, especially in Ableton Live, you've got the glue compressor, which I think is a fantastic compressor. And if I set the ratio at 10:1, which if you looked at my other snare and kick videos, that basically means for every 10 decibels that it goes over the threshold, it gets reduced to 1 decibel above the threshold. So 20 decibels above, it gets reduced to 2 decibels. So it's basically a ratio 10:1. Like if you think of gambling, if you put a pound in, you got 10 back. Yeah, so on and so forth. So yeah, threshold, we just start bringing that down. And even though it's making it quieter for now, you can hear that it's really making that transient click a lot harder. And then obviously all we have to do is bring it back up with makeup gain. Now obviously you do have to be careful how much you do this, because you can make it start to distort. And obviously with the soft clip on, so it doesn't clip after it goes past the glue compressor, it's really going to start to crush and compress and squeeze that sample down into basically, so it'll almost look like a digital sausage. A strange way to describe it, but yeah, you'll see what I mean when you bounce that down. It's just literally just solid black, this waveform. And the next thing is, I'm just going to show you a little bit more. So we've got 2 compressors here. So another thing you can do is do different types of compression. So if I just turn this group on, so I've got the OTT. I set obviously for this with the fundamental being around 349 Hertz. Actually, I could set that a little bit higher. I'm going to set that to 372 just so I can compress the low band where the fundamental is, and then the high band. And I've done a dry wet amount of 26% here, so it's not fully on, but we could listen to this fully on or fully off. Now this is obviously where the signal chain does come into consideration, because obviously I've set this after the gated reverb, but if I put it before, it would change the sound going into the gated reverb. Afterwards, it's going to lift all of that stuff up that we've done with the gated reverb. And obviously I can set the amount to taste on what I like and what I don't like. And then, as I was explaining before with the glue compressor, bringing that threshold down, I could set this to 10:1 just to really get that transient attack in, and then bringing the makeup gain back up so we can lift that, because obviously it's going to bring down the level because it's compressing it every time it goes above the threshold. It's bringing the signal down, and then using makeup gain to bring it back up. Cool. And then obviously it's always good, as I say, just to check what you've done against the music, because you're not really going to, unless you're in sound design stage, you're not going to be making these snares in isolation, or if you're trying to get them into the mix, it's going to be against some other forms of music. So let's listen to it with some music. So there you go, guys. That's 5 ways on how to make your snares sound bigger and better. I'm going to look at more ways in the future, but I hope you've liked this video. If you have, guys, please subscribe, like, share, hit the notification bell so you see my futures more in the videos more in the future. A little bit of a slip of the tongue there. And also have a look at my other videos as well, because I'm doing a lot more of these tutorials. Leave a comment below if you've got any suggestions or questions about this, or suggestions for future videos that you'd like to see. Anyway, guys, I'll see you next time. Bye.
Everybody jump up, come on!